All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children. Men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendus est. Mechanical keyboards, Purificals Too Tough for Girls, written by Conrad Riker. Available now, links in description. Mechanical Keyboards, a field guide for men who still notice reality. The Sleep Shorts Insurrection, exposing the good daughter cult of feelings and the genocentric affective debt dismantling Western civilization. You look at the wreckage of modern discourse, and you see a tantrum dressed as philosophy. The article before us, which posits that wearing pajama shorts is a revolutionary act against the patriarchal affective debt, is not just wrong. It is a crystallized symptom of a civilization committing suicide by solipsism. While our ancestors built aqueducts and formulated the syllogism, the modern emancipated woman conflates the inconvenience of social expectations with the brutal reality of survival. She speaks of debt as if the very roof over her head, the electricity powering her laptop to type this drivel, and the police keeping the streets safe at night were not bought and paid for by the blood, sweat, and tax dollars of men she despises. We will invert this nonsense to reveal the actual genocentric affective debt, the unrepayable resource extraction men have provided for millennia, now framed as oppression because gratitude requires humility. We must apply the precision instrument of classical learning to remove this growth of feeling as truth. The writer asserts that if you feel threatened, you are being attacked, a logical error so profound it would make a medieval logician weep. This is the empathy gap weaponized. It is the demand that the outside world twist itself to match the internal patterns of female hysteria. We will follow the history of rational back to its Latin root, reason and calculation, and show how the rejection of logic is not freedom, but a return to primitive disorder. To claim compliance is violence, while depending on the complete compliance of the disposable male to maintain basic infrastructure is the supreme hypocrisy of the good daughter who refuses to mature. Get ready, because we're going to take apart this histrionics handbook piece by piece. We'll demonstrate how speaker tips such as never apologize are nothing more than guidelines for turning into a functional sociopath, lacking the self-correcting mechanisms that develop character. I'll explain how the notion of mansplaining operates as an epistemic gatekeeper meant to sanction truth and protect the ideology from any reality testing. This represents the NPC script in motion, a repetitive cycle of narcissism that requires the world to burn so she can feel comfortable. The good daughter isn't deceased, she's merely having a temper tantrum in the grocery store, and we're going to be the adults who finally turn our backs. Bunkum article by a feminist PhD. The sublimation of self, dismantling the good daughter industrial complex. We exist in a state of emergency. The subtle, suffocating gaslighting of the cis-heteropatriarchal hegemony has permeated the very marrow of our bones, enforcing a regime of silence and servility that we have been conditioned to mistake for love. I am speaking, of course, of the good daughter contract. This is not merely a familial dynamic, it is a microcosm of the systemic oppression that seeks to commodify our very essence. It is a mechanism of patriarchal affective debt, a theoretical framework I am introducing today to describe the emotional labor extracted from femmes and non-binary bodies under the guise of duty. A debt that can never be repaid because the currency itself, our submission, is worthless. For too long, we have been trapped in the binary of good and bad, obedient and rebellious, emotional and rational. These are not natural states. They are constructs of the ruling class designed to fragment our power. To deconstruct these binaries is not an intellectual exercise, it is a moral imperative. We must recognize that the rational is merely a shield for the emotionally stunted oppressor, while the emotional is the seat of all true knowledge. When we reject the binary, we reject the hierarchy that places the stoic, unfeeling patriarch above the nurturing, feeling matriarch. We must learn to trust our feelings again. In a world that demands receipts and data for our trauma, trusting your gut is a radical act of insurrection. Your feelings are not subjective in the way the gatekeepers of science would have you believe. They are phenomenological truths of the highest order. If you feel unsafe, you are under attack. If you feel erased, a cultural genocide is taking place. There is no hierarchy of oppression that validates your pain over your lived experience. To doubt your feelings is to internalize the voice of the oppressor. To trust them is to seize the means of cognitive production. Consider the sleep shorts. This garment is not mere apparel. It is a symbol of the reclamation of the private sphere. For centuries, the good daughter was expected to be presentable, accessible, and decorative even in her rest. Sleep shorts represent the refusal to be looked at. They are the uniform of the unobserved self, the body that exists for its own comfort, not for the consumption of the male gaze or the judgment of the matriarchal enforcer. When you slip on sleep shorts, you're engaging in a praxis of bodily autonomy, signaling to the universe that your flesh is no longer a public resource for the accumulation of social capital. But reclaiming our bodies and our minds requires new tools of engagement. We cannot fight the power using the master's tools of politeness and civility. We need speaker tips for the revolutionary age. Never apologize for existence. To say sorry is to accept a debt you did not incur. Replace apologies with assertions. Do not say, "Sorry, I feel this way." Say, "I am feeling this way," and it is your duty to witness it. Interrupt the mansplaining. If a person of privilege attempts to correct your lived experience with their logic, you are morally obligated to shout them down. Their logic is a construct of their power. Your truth is absolute. Reject the calm down directive. When the oppressor tells you to calm down, they are attempting to regulate your resistance. Your rage is a fuel. Your volatility is the engine of change. We do this for one purpose: recognition. Not the recognition defined by the accolades of the patriarchy, degrees, marriages, motherhood, but the profound existential recognition of the collective. We demand to be seen on our terms. We demand that the structures that have relied on our unpaid labor, our silence, and our compliance collapse under the weight of our refusal. The good daughter is dead. She has been sacrificed on the altar of liberation, and from her ashes we rise disobedient, loud, and gloriously free. The contract is null and void. The debt is cancelled. We are not here to serve, we are here to overthrow. Feelings are facts, compliance is violence. The epistemology of the womb and the erasure of logos. Schopenhauer famously posited that women are big children their whole life long, seeing with the eye of the species rather than the individual, and looking at the screed we are about to dismantle. Old Arthur was understating the case. This writer, a distinct product of our solipsistic age, wails about a state of emergency and a patriarchal affective debt, a term she invents to describe the emotional labor extracted from femmes under the guise of duty. This is classic projection. She accuses the system of extracting submission when in reality history reveals the exact inverse, the gynocentric affective debt. Consider the etymology of duty, derived from the Old French dû, meaning that which is owed. For millennia, men owed the blood tax they died in the mud of Flanders and the burning sands of the Middle East so that women could sit safely in the drawing room complaining about the tea service. The infrastructure that allows this writer to broadcast her narcissism, the electrical grid, the internet, the logistics chains, the sewage treatment, was built and maintained almost entirely by men. If we are to speak of debts that can never be repaid, look no further than the unrequited sacrifice of male biological utility. She claims submission is worthless currency. Tell that to the coal miner with black lung or the construction worker with a bad back who broke his body to keep the heat on in her safe space. The only debt here is the one civilization owes to the disposable male, a debt she is attempting to default on by redefining his sacrifice as oppression. To understand the intellectual bankruptcy of this good daughter narrative, we must apply the autoregressive loop of the propaganda axis. Status nol elge, meaning, feeling, ditty, poa, sanction, immunity. The narrator assigns herself the asymmetric status of the moral patient, the wounded victim of a vague hegemony, while positioning men, specifically the Stoic patriarch, as the moral agent. Because she claims the status of the oppressed, she asserts identity-gated nolja. She knows the truth of the system because of her lived experience, whereas your logic is merely a construct of your privilege. This inflates the meaning of her mild discomfort, being expected to be presentable into cultural genocide. This is gamma bias in its purest form. Female suffering is amplified to the level of atrocity, while the genuine suffering of men, the fact that men make up 92% of workplace fatalities, for instance, is minimized or erased entirely. When she says we exist in a state of emergency, she is using feeling as truth. Her anxiety is treated as an objective fact of the environment. This generates a unilateral duty. Men must adjust their behavior. Men must shut up. Men must witness her feelings. Power is framed as abstract and structural patriarchy, which justifies the sanction of shouting down dissent or interrupting the mansplaining. Finally, the ideology achieves self-sealing immunity. If you criticize her refusal to be civil, you are merely proving her point that you are an oppressor demanding servility. It is a closed loop of circular reasoning, designed to protect the ego from the harsh light of reality. The article attempts to deconstruct the binary between emotional and rational, claiming the rational is a shield for the emotionally stunted oppressor. Let us trace the roots of ratio from the Latin, meaning reason or computation. It is the faculty that distinguishes human beings from beasts. It is the logos, the underlying order of the cosmos. To reject rationality in favor of phenomenological truth, a fancy word for whatever I feel right now, is not an act of liberation. It is a regression to infancy and chaos. The author states, if you feel unsafe, you are under attack. If you feel erased, a cultural genocide is taking place. This is the hallmark of a mind possessed by ideology, a true NPC zombie unable to distinguish between internal sentiment and external reality. Let us subject this to a simple syllogism to demonstrate its absurdity. Premise 1. The article asserts that feelings are facts and constitute a valid epistemology for truth. Premise 2. Two different subjects can hold contradictory feelings simultaneously, e.g., a woman feels erased by a man's presence, while a man feels innocent and justified. Conclusion. If feelings are facts, then contradictory truths exist simultaneously in the same place and time. Since reality cannot contain contradictions, the law of non-contradiction is fundamental to logic. It follows that feelings are not facts. The author's premise refutes itself. If lived experience is the only metric of truth, then communication is impossible because there is no shared objective reality to communicate about. We are left with millions of isolated solipsists screaming into the void, which incidentally sounds exactly like modern social media. The writer hails sleep shorts as a symbol of the unobserved self and a practice of bodily autonomy, signaling that her flesh is no longer a public resource. This is the ultimate triviality of the feminist movement. While men are fighting courts for the right to see their own children, a system where fathers are denied custody in roughly 82% of cases where they seek it. This woman thinks wearing pajama bottoms is a revolutionary act. Against the male gaze, it is a parody of political engagement. She offers sticker advice for the revolutionary age: never apologize, interrupt the mansplaining, and reject the calm down directive. This is not a manifesto for equality. It is a guide for becoming a narcissistic tyrant in one's own home. Imagine a marriage built on these principles: no apologies, constant interruption, and validation of every volatile emotional outburst. It is a recipe for immediate divorce, which is, of course, the point. The good daughter contract she wishes to nullify is simply the social contract of civilization. The social contract is simple. Men provide protection and resources, the patriarchal effective investment, and women provide the continuity of the species and a civilizing influence on the domestic sphere. She wants to abrogate her side of the contract while keeping the benefits. She writes, "We are not here to serve, we are here to overthrow." What she fails to grasp is that without the good daughter dynamic and the corresponding good son dynamic who protects and provides, the structure collapses. You cannot overthrow the infrastructure of reality. The electricity she uses to type her manifesto relies on the stoic rationality of engineers she despises. When the lights finally go out and the patriarchy is no longer there to maintain the grid, she will find out very quickly that her phenomenological truths do not generate heat, nor do her sleep shorts stop the wolves at the door. The fundamental error here is the confusion of feeling with moral authority, a tactic central to what Schopenhauer would identify as the ruthless, egoistic will to life manifesting as feminine manipulation. By prioritizing feeling over logic, the writer is attempting to bypass the cognitive faculties of the observer and attack them directly at the emotional level, a form of psychological warfare. She demands recognition not for achievements, but merely for existing. This is the death rattle of a decadent civilization. The demand for status without competence, for authority without responsibility, and for immunity from criticism. The conspiracy she sees is not a plot by men, but the friction of reality against a deluded ego. She claims the contract is null, but nature does not accept nullification. The laws of biology, economics, and physics remain in force. The men she berates are simply walking away, a phenomenon we see in the rising rates of men refusing to marry and the lying flat movement. If the result of her revolution is that men decide she is right, that they owe her nothing, and she owes them nothing, she will perish in the comfort of her solipsism. She has killed the good daughter, but she has forgotten that the good daughter was necessary to raise the good son, and without the good son, the walls of the city crumble. She is not dismantling a prison. She is dismantling the house she lives in, thinking she is building a castle in the air. This transition from metaphysical delusion to behavioral pathology is instantaneous. Once you accept that feeling supersedes knowledge, you inevitably produce a manual for social destruction. This writer explicitly lists speaking guidelines that encourage women to never apologize and to interrupt men, framing a lack of impulse control as a revolutionary act. This is not advice, it is a recipe for sociopathy. By refusing to apologize, she attempts to grant herself immunity from the consequences of reality, severing the connection between action and feedback. She calls for women to rise disobedient, loud, and gloriously free. Yet the rhetoric is mechanically identical to the programmed output of millions of NPC units in the cultural Marxist hive mind. It is a demand for CSS without duty, where the goal is not to communicate, but to dominate the semantic space until compliance itself is redefined as violence, the histrionics handbook and the ritualization of rudeness. Civilization is not a gift, it is an achievement, and it is maintained by the stoic endurance of men who bear the weight of reality so that others may live in a fantasy of feelings. When you read the frantic, incoherent manifesto of the modern feminist, specifically this good daughter's creed, you are not witnessing a philosophy. You are witnessing the temper tantrum of a toddler who has discovered she can set the house on fire and blame the architect. The writer claims we are in a state of emergency, and she is right, but not for the reasons she thinks. The emergency is the total collapse of the epistemic gatekeeping that once kept our civilization anchored in reality. She speaks of patriarchal affective debt, a nonsense term cobbled together in the faculty lounge to describe the horror of being expected to contribute to the family unit. Let's apply the trivium to this garbage. Grammar defines the terms, logic tests the connections, and rhetoric communicates the truth. Here, the grammar is corrupted. the logic is non-existent, and the rhetoric is purely emotional coercion. She argues that the good daughter is a victim of servility, ignoring the biological reality that the family unit is the only reason we aren't starving in caves. She wants to reject the binary of rational and emotional, but this is a rhetorical trick to elevate her subjective emotional state to an objective truth, bypassing the gatekeepers of science, who we used to call doctors and physicists, because reality does not care about her feelings. Observe the desperate ritualization of rudeness in her speaker tips, a guide for social destruction that would make a sociopath blush. She advises never apologize for existence, substituting apologies with assertions of duty. This reflects Jordan Peterson's warning: if you cannot apologize, you cannot self-correct. Apology is the mechanism by which we acknowledge being wrong and align ourselves with the transcendent order of the world. Refusing to apologize is to declare oneself God, infallible, and immune to criticism. She instructs her followers to interrupt the mansplaining and reject the calm down directive, portraying male agitation as a threat and female agitation as fuel. Consider this through the lens of evolutionary psychology, as David Buss and Gad Saad might. For millions of years, male agitation signaled the preparation for physical violence or hunting. It is a high-cost, high-stakes signal that demands immediate attention. Female agitation, conversely, evolved largely as a manipulation tactic to extract resources and protection from the tribe. When a man tells you to calm down, he is engaging his prefrontal cortex to de-escalate a threat. When you refuse, you are admitting you are operating purely from the primitive limbic system, a slave to impulse, incapable of reason. She is encouraging her followers to bypass the very organ that separates humans from beasts, the neocortex, in favor of a reptilian screech. Consider the absurd elevation of sleep shorts to a totem of revolutionary action. She claims these garments are the uniform of the unobserved self, a refusal to be looked at. This is the height of narcissism disguised as rebellion. In a world where men are building skyscrapers, laying fiber optic cables, and fighting wars to keep the lights on, this woman thinks wearing cotton shorts while she sleeps is a blow against the patriarchy. This is the consumerist hollowing out of meaning. She cannot find a genuine struggle, so she must turn a trip to Target into a political campaign. It is a pathetic attempt to fill the vacuum left by the absence of genuine achievement. Masculine identity is forged in competence and the ability to handle the harshness of reality. Her identity is forged in the soft fabrics of her bedroom and the validation of strangers. This is the recognition demand she speaks of, not the recognition of merit, which is hard to earn, but existential recognition, which is merely entitlement wearing a dress. She demands to be seen on her terms, which is impossible, because reality does not have terms, it only has consequences. The irony of her claiming to be gloriously free while reciting the exact same script as every other leftist NPC on the internet is palpable. She uses the phrases lived experience, cis-heteropatriarchal hegemony, and sees the means of cognitive production with the robotic precision of a biological automaton. She is not a free thinker. She is a hive-mind drone, a node in a network of cultural Marxism programmed to deconstruct the West. She claims she is disobedient, but she is perfectly obedient to the dictates of the academy and the mainstream media. She is a good daughter of the ideology, sacrificing her actual happiness on the altar of liberation. The text is an autoregressive loop of the status knowledge meaning axis. She claims victim status uses identity-gated knowledge, my truth, inflates the meaning of her feelings to phenomenological truths, and uses this to claim immunity from logic. If you criticize her, you are mansplaining. If you disagree, you are perpetrating cultural genocide. This is a self-sealing ideology, a circular firing squad where the only escape is total submission to her feelings. The most Orwellian tactic, however, is the semantic inflation at the end. Compliance is violence. This is not a figure of speech. It is a strategic redefinition of language to justify aggression by defining compliance, or worse, mere civility, as violence. She creates a moral license to commit actual violence against men who refuse to bow to her demands. It is the same logic used by totalitarian regimes throughout history to purge the dissenters. She frames logic as a constructive power, which is a convenient way to avoid losing an argument. If logic is just oppression, then she is free to be illogical and her irrationality becomes a virtue. This is the death of the dialectic. You cannot reason with someone who believes that your attempt to reason is an act of war. She says feelings are facts, but facts are stubborn things. They exist independent of her emotional state. The bridge collapses whether you feel supported or not. The electricity stops flowing whether you feel empowered or not. Ultimately, her wish to overthrow without understanding how to build or maintain is an invitation for societal chaos. She hates the good daughter contract, but that contract was the glue holding her reality together. The patriarchy she despises is just a fancy word for the structure of civilization built by men to protect and provide for women. She wants to dismantle the shelter because she doesn't like the color of the curtains, not realizing that outside the wolves are waiting. She speaks of unpaid labor and silence, ignoring the fact that while she was sleeping in her revolutionary shorts, men were working in the mines, the factories, and the offices to pay for the electricity that powers her delusions. The good daughter was not a slave. She was the custodian of the hearth, a role of immense biological and social importance. But in her hubris, she has traded that noble duty for the emptiness of loud and gloriously free narcissism. She is not overthrowing the master. She is burning down the house, and she will be the first to freeze when the fire goes out. Look closely at the revolutionary nature of sleep shorts, and tell me you do not see the face of narcissism staring back. This author attempts to frame her own comfort and indolence as high-stakes political warfare, a classic semantic inflation tactic designed to elevate personal preference to the level of moral imperative. She claims feelings are facts, a linguistic trap that shuts down all debate, because if her internal mood is the equivalent of physical reality, then any contradiction is not just a disagreement, but an act of war. This is the autoregressive loop of the leftist NPC, status as victim, feeling as evidence, and any logic you employ is immediately branded as a weapon of the oppressor. But let us apply the trivium. Ratio implies a computation based on external reality, not internal whim. If feelings were facts, the power grid would fail, the bridges would collapse, and the internet she uses to broadcast her misery would vanish into the ether, instantly disproving her own thesis by the very fact of her continued existence. She screams of patriarchal affective debt, yet we live in a world defined by gynocentric affective extraction. For centuries, men have labored, died in wars, and worked themselves into early graves to pay a debt of safety and provision that women never agreed to repay, yet gladly consume. The suicide rate of men is skyrocketing. Family courts strip fathers of their children and assets at a rate that would make a feudal lord blush, and men are systematically erased from the academic and public sphere. Yet this woman has the audacity to claim she is the one being silenced, because she is expected to wear pajamas. This is gamma bias in its most toxic form, maximizing her minimal inconvenience while minimizing the catastrophic suffering of the men who built the infrastructure that allows her to whine in the first place. The good daughter contract was not a tool of oppression, it was the social glue that prevented feminine chaos from swallowing the family unit, and by breaking it, she invites the very isolation she claims to fear. You have now seen the Matrix. You understand that when they demand you stop mansplaining, they are demanding you stop speaking truth, which is an admission that their ideology cannot withstand the light of scrutiny. Do not be cowed by their buzzwords or their tears. Recognize that toxic femininity is the refusal to accept the duty that accompanies the rights they scream for. You are the bearer of the logos, the defender of reason against the siege of feelings. Take this knowledge, wield it like the mechanical keyboard. It is tactile, precise, and durable, and strike back against the lies. The spell is broken, and you are free to walk away from the table where the deck was stacked against you from the start. Go forth and win. And now the sponsored book introduction, Mechanical Keyboards, Peripherals Too Tough for Girls. I remember the day my standard keyboard gave out during a critical project. The keys felt mushy, unresponsive, and utterly inadequate for the demands of real work. That failure pushed me to discover mechanical keyboards, tools built to endure, reflect precision, and embody masculine resolve. This book, Mechanical Keyboards, Peripherals Too Tough for Girls, is born from years of testing, research, and first-hand battles against a culture that dismisses robust technology as outdated or toxic. Society often rewards fragility while mocking strength, trapping men in a no-win scenario where expressing authority is labeled oppression, yet showing vulnerability invites contempt. If you are tired of flimsy peripherals failing when you need decisive action, or weary of critics who equate your preference for durability with toxicity, this book is your blueprint for reclaiming control. You will learn why mechanical keyboards outlast fleeting trends backed by neuroscience, showing men excel with tactile feedback over touchscreen passivity. Chapters like Switch Selection as Leadership Paradigm reveal how choosing switches mirrors commanding with logic, while Engineering Masculinity into Circuit Boards dissects the design principles that fortify your workspace into a fortress of focus. We tackle the double binds head-on, from countering accusations of emasculation and countering technological emasculation to proving neurological advantages in neurological superiority in input devices. This is not theory, it is actionable science, drawn from combat-tested protocols and anthropological patterns of human innovation. For red-pilled, rational men, these insights transform keystrokes into declarations of authority, silencing doubters and forging brotherhoods built on unbreakable hardware. To those outside this audience, individuals who find strength threatening or logic oppressive, put this book down now, go knit a sweater, binge reality television, or dabble in hobbies that celebrate compliance over competence. You will gain nothing here but frustration. For the rational man, however, delaying this read means surrendering to inferior tools and societal sabotage. Buy it today, dominate your desk, let every click echo your legacy. Mechanical Keyboards, Peripherals Too Tough for Girls, written by Conrad Riker. Buy now. Links in description.